It all began on a cold, gray morning when the world outside seemed as lifeless as Anna's heart. At 78 years old, she had already endured more than most people could imagine, losses that carved deep scars into her soul. But nothing prepared her for the news that arrived like a dagger through her chest. Her ex-husband, the man with whom she once shared laughter and tears, was gone forever. His passing wasn't just an event. It felt like the universe itself had collapsed around her. For days, Anna sat in silence, staring out of her window at the rain-soaked streets below. She stopped answering calls from friends, ignored knocks on her door, and refused to leave the confines of her home. Her world shrank to four suffocating walls where memories whispered cruelly in the shadows. One fateful morning, the air thick with frost and despair, Anna's youngest daughter, Emily, stormed into her apartment. Determined not to let her mother fade away, Emily tried every tactic she knew, pleading, reasoning, even shouting, but nothing worked. Frustrated yet unwilling to give up, Emily did something drastic. As the rain began to fall again, she grabbed her mother by the arm and physically dragged her toward the front door. "You're coming with me," Emily said firmly, her voice trembling with both anger and desperation. Anna resisted fiercely, her frail body shaking as she protested, but Emily didn't relent. With one final tug, they stepped outside into the chilly drizzle. The first few steps were agony, not just for Anna's aging legs, but for her wounded spirit. Each movement felt like a betrayal of the grief she clung to so tightly. Yet, as the cool droplets kissed her skin and the earthy scent of wet pavement filled the air, something unexpected happened. A flicker of light pierced through the darkness, clouding her mind. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. A whisper of freedom, a hint of possibility. Anna hesitated, then took another step, and another. Slowly, painfully, she began to walk. With each stride, the weight crushing her chest seemed to lift ever so slightly. The rhythm of her footsteps became a mantra, a reminder that she was still alive, still capable of moving forward despite everything. Memories of the past flooded back, not the painful ones this time, but moments of laughter and love. She remembered picnics under the summer sun, long walks hand in hand with her late husband, and carefree afternoons spent chasing butterflies with her grandchildren. These fragments of happiness reignited a spark within her, fragile but determined to grow. But the journey wasn't easy. There were days when the pain returned with such ferocity that Anna wanted to retreat back into her shell. One particularly bleak afternoon, as thunderclouds loomed overhead, she found herself standing at the edge of a park, paralyzed by indecision. Should she turn back, give in to the emptiness threatening to consume her once more? Just as doubt crept in, a stranger approached, an elderly man walking his dog. He smiled warmly and tipped his hat before continuing on his way. That simple act of kindness stirred something deep inside Anna. She realized that life continued moving, whether she chose to join it or not. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to take one more step, then another, until she reached the other side of the park. Over time, those small victories added together. What started as reluctant strolls transformed into purposeful walks. Anna discovered beauty in places she'd never noticed before: the golden hues of autumn leaves, the symphony of birdsong at dawn, the gentle rustle of grass beneath her feet. Most importantly, she discovered strength within herself. Walking became more than just exercise. It became a form of rebellion against the forces trying to pull her under. Every step was a declaration of resilience, a refusal to surrender to despair. Months later, Anna joined a local walking group, a decision that changed her life in ways she never anticipated. Surrounded by others who shared her newfound passion, she formed friendships that brought color back into her world. Together, they explored trails, laughed over shared stories, and supported each other through challenges. Anna no longer felt alone. In fact, she radiated a vitality that surprised even herself. Gone was the woman who had locked herself away in grief. In her place stood someone stronger, braver, and infinitely more alive. Life, as Anna had come to realize during her daily walks, was a series of choices. Choices that could either lift you up or drag you down. She often thought about how small actions, like stepping outside for a walk, had transformed her life from one of despair to hope. But for 85-year-old John, the stakes were much higher. His battle wasn't just against time, it was against an invisible enemy gnawing at his body, type 2 diabetes. It all began on a cold November morning when John sat in the sterile examination room of his doctor's office. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the walls. As the doctor delivered the grim diagnosis, type 2 diabetes, and explained the potential consequences, including amputation if left unchecked, John felt as though he'd been punched in the gut. "Change your diet immediately," the doctor warned, his voice firm but tinged with concern. "Or we may have no choice but to take drastic measures." For John, those words weren't just medical advice. They were a death sentence looming over him. At first, John scoffed at the idea of changing his eating habits. How could anyone expect him, at 85 years old, to give up the comfort foods he'd cherished for decades? Burgers, fries, and sugary desserts weren't just meals. They were memories wrapped in flavors. Determined to resist, he hid bags of chips and candy bars in the drawers of his desk, sneaking bites whenever hunger struck. Each bite tasted like rebellion, a quiet refusal to surrender to what he saw as an unreasonable demand. But fate has a way of forcing us to confront our weaknesses. One fateful night, as John sat alone in his dimly lit living room, watching reruns of old sitcoms, a sharp, searing pain shot through his left foot. It started as a dull ache, but quickly escalated into something unbearable. Panic set in as he realized he couldn't stand without wincing. With trembling hands, he dialed emergency services, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. By the time paramedics arrived, sweat poured down his face, and fear gripped every fiber of his being. At the hospital, doctors confirmed the worst: nerve damage caused by uncontrolled blood sugar levels. They warned him again, if he didn't change his lifestyle immediately, this would be only the beginning. That night became a turning point for John. Lying awake in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, he replayed the events of his life. He thought about Anna, whom he'd met months earlier while walking in the park. Her energy and vitality had inspired him then, but now her story took on new meaning. If she could rebuild her spirit after losing her ex-husband, surely he could muster the strength to save himself. This realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. He vowed never to let another moment pass without taking control of his health. The next day, armed with a list of recommended foods provided by the nutritionist, John embarked on a journey that felt more daunting than climbing Mount Everest. Breakfasts of bacon and pancakes were replaced with oatmeal topped with fresh berries. Lunches of greasy burgers gave way to grilled chicken salads bursting with color. Dinners centered around lean proteins, whole grains, and vegetables became his new norm. At first, the transition felt torturous. The blandness of steamed broccoli paled in comparison to the richness of fried chicken. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. John noticed subtle changes, not just in his body, but in his mind. The foggy haze of fatigue lifted, replaced by clarity and focus. He found joy in experimenting with recipes, discovering flavors he never knew existed. A simple dish of roasted carrots seasoned with herbs brought unexpected delight. 6 months later, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Not only had John shed 30 pounds, but his overall health had improved dramatically. Blood tests showed his glucose levels were under control, and the numbness in his feet had subsided. More importantly, he radiated a newfound confidence. Inspired by Mary, the woman who turned her life around through strength training, John decided to share his journey with others. He organized weekly gatherings at the community center, where seniors gathered to discuss healthy eating tips and swap recipes. Together, they cooked nutritious meals, laughed over shared struggles, and celebrated victories big and small. One evening, as John stood before a group of eager listeners, he recounted his darkest moments, the nights spent hiding junk food, the terror of waking up in pain, and the epiphany that changed everything. "We're not defined by our mistakes," he declared, his voice steady and strong. "We're defined by how we rise above them." His words resonated deeply, especially with Rick, the retired teacher who had recently rediscovered his love for learning. Rick approached John afterward, thanking him for the inspiration. "If you can do it," Rick said, smiling, "then so can I." Through these connections, John realized that nourishing the body went hand in hand with nurturing relationships. Just as walking had reignited Anna's sense of purpose and playing piano had rekindled Rick's passion, embracing a healthier diet had given John a second chance at life. And in doing so, he reminded everyone around him that it's never too late to rewrite your story. Life, as Anna had discovered during her daily walks, was a series of choices. Choices that could either breathe vitality into your existence or leave you stranded in stagnation. For John, the realization came through the transformative power of healthy eating, a journey that brought him back from the brink of despair. But for Rick, the path to rediscovery wasn't paved with steps or meals. It was built on notes, chords, and an unyielding determination to reclaim his mind. At 76 years old, Rick's once vibrant world had dimmed into monotony after retirement. The classroom, once alive with laughter and curiosity, now existed only in faded memories. His days stretched endlessly before him, devoid of purpose. Worse still, cracks began to form in his sharp intellect. He forgot names, those of students he'd taught decades ago, friends he'd cherished all his life, even passwords he typed every day. One morning, staring blankly at his laptop screen, Rick mistook his cat lounging on the couch for his dog outside. It was then that doubt crept in. Was he losing himself? The turning point came one fateful evening when Rick absent-mindedly left the gas stove on while preparing dinner. As smoke filled the kitchen, panic surged through him. Fumbling to shut off the burner, he realized how close he had come to disaster, not just for his home, but for his very life. That night, sitting alone in the dark, Rick confronted a chilling truth. His mind, the engine that had driven his entire career, was slipping away. The thought terrified him. Would he spend the rest of his days fading further into forgetfulness? Determined not to surrender, Rick made a decision that shocked even himself. He would learn to play the piano. A lifelong lover of music, he had always admired pianists from afar, convinced it was a skill reserved for the young and nimble-fingered. At nearly 80, his hands trembled slightly, and sheet music seemed like an indecipherable code. Yet something inside him refused to give up. "What do I have to lose?" he muttered under his breath, signing up for beginner lessons at a local community center. The first few weeks were brutal. Each note felt clumsy, each chord disjointed. His fingers stumbled over keys, producing sounds more akin to a cacophony than melody. Some nights, frustration overwhelmed him. Why bother? He questioned whether this endeavor was futile. But then he remembered Mary, the woman who turned her life around through strength training, and Anna, whose resilience shone brightest during her darkest moments. If they could rise above their struggles, so could he. Slowly, imperceptibly, progress emerged. After 2 months of relentless practice, Rick found himself playing simple tunes without glancing at the sheet music. By the third month, he tackled Beethoven's Für Elise, a piece he'd dreamed of mastering since childhood. The breakthrough ignited a spark within him, a reminder that his mind was still capable of greatness. More importantly, the act of learning rekindled his passion for living. Music became his sanctuary, a place where time dissolved and joy took its place. Eager to share his newfound love, Rick organized a small recital at the local senior living facility. Word spread quickly among residents and staff alike. On the day of the performance, Rick stood nervously behind the piano, adjusting his glasses and taking deep breaths. When his fingers touched the keys, however, everything else faded away. Notes flowed effortlessly, weaving a tapestry of sound that transported the audience to another realm. Applause erupted as the final chord echoed through the room. Tears streamed down faces, young and old, as people marveled at the triumph unfolding before them. Over 200 attendees packed the hall, many inspired by Rick's story of perseverance and hope. In the weeks that followed, Rick became a symbol of possibility. Neighbors stopped him on walks to express admiration. Strangers approached him at the grocery store, thanking him for reminding them that age is no barrier to growth. Even John, who had transformed his health through diet, joined Rick for weekly jam sessions, blending jazz improvisations with heartfelt conversations about life. Together, they proved that staying mentally active isn't just about preserving memory, it's about creating new ones. Rick's journey underscored a universal truth. Our minds crave stimulation as much as our bodies need movement and nourishment. Engaging in activities that challenge us, whether it's reading, solving puzzles, or picking up a musical instrument, can reignite dormant passions and unlock hidden potential. For Rick, the piano wasn't merely an instrument. It was a lifeline, pulling him back from the edge of oblivion and propelling him toward a future brimming with promise. Mary's life had always been a testament to resilience. At 82, she was known in her Colorado neighborhood as the woman who could outlast anyone, gardening under the scorching sun, chasing after her energetic grandchildren, and even climbing ladders to prune trees. But life has a way of testing even the strongest among us. A minor accident, a slip on a wet kitchen floor, left Mary struggling with tasks that once seemed effortless. Rising from her favorite armchair became an ordeal. Carrying her watering can felt like dragging a boulder. Her independence, something she cherished more than anything, began slipping through her fingers. Then came the day that shattered what little confidence remained. One chilly afternoon, Mary slipped again, this time in the bathroom. The cold tiles pressed against her back as panic set in. She screamed for help, but no one heard. For 2 excruciating hours, she lay there, helpless and humiliated. When her neighbor finally found her, tears streamed down Mary's face, not just from the physical pain, but from the crushing realization that she might never regain control of her own body. That moment haunted her, a stark reminder of how fragile strength could be. But fate works in mysterious ways. A dear friend, Anta, Bogaitamas, the same woman who'd rediscovered joy through daily walks, urged Mary to try a senior fitness class focused on light strength training. It's not about being young, Anna said firmly. It's about loving life enough to fight for it. Initially, Mary hesitated. The thought of exposing her frailty in front of others filled her with dread. Yet desperation outweighed fear. With trembling hands, she joined the group, clutching a pair of tiny dumbbells during seated exercises. Every squat hurt, every lift felt awkward, and self-doubt whispered cruelly in her ear, "You're too old for this." Yet something miraculous happened. Week by week, Mary noticed small victories. Her legs grew steadier, her arms stronger. By the end of 6 weeks, she wasn't just standing up without assistance. She was lifting weights and performing modified squats with ease. More importantly, her spirit reignited. The shame of falling dissolved into pride. Soon, Mary became a beacon of hope for others in her community. She encouraged hesitant seniors to join her, sharing how strength training had transformed her life. Her transformation inspired Rick, the retired teacher who'd recently taken up piano lessons. Watching Mary lift weights reminded him that growth isn't limited to the mind. It extends to the body too. Together, they proved that aging doesn't have to mean surrendering to weakness. Instead, it can be a call to rise stronger, defy expectations, and reclaim vitality. Loneliness, as Sarah had come to know it, was not just an emotion. It was a suffocating weight that pressed down on her chest every waking moment. At 80 years old, she lived in a small apartment filled with memories of her late husband, but devoid of laughter or connection. Since his passing, Sarah had slowly withdrawn from the world outside. Phone calls went unanswered, letters remained unopened, and even the soft knock of neighbors at her door failed to stir her curiosity. Her once vibrant life had shrunk into 4 desolate walls where silence reigned supreme. Then came the day that shattered what little semblance of normalcy Sarah clung to. A relentless cold swept through her frail body, leaving her weak and disoriented. For hours, she lay shivering on the cold floor, her voice too faint to call for help. The realization struck her like a thunderclap. No one would come looking for her. No family member knew how ill she was. No friend suspected anything amiss. It wasn't until a concerned neighbor, a woman named Anna, who often walked past Sarah's window during her daily strolls, noticed the blinds hadn't moved all day, that someone finally entered the apartment. What they found was harrowing. Sarah unconscious, pale and barely breathing. Rushed to the hospital, Sarah hovered between life and death for days. But it was here, amidst sterile white walls and beeping machines, that something unexpected happened. During her recovery, Sarah encountered a group of elderly volunteers who visited patients regularly. These kind souls weren't there to simply pass the time. They listened intently, shared stories, and radiated warmth. They invited Sarah to join their community activities, ranging from book readings to cooking sessions designed to bring people together. Initially hesitant, Sarah felt a spark of hope ignite within her, a feeling she hadn't experienced since her husband's passing. The transformation didn't happen overnight. At first, stepping out of her comfort zone felt like climbing Mount Everest. Memories of Rick learning piano at nearly 80 echoed in her mind. If he could embrace change, why couldn't she? With each small step, attending a reading session, joining a recipe swap, Sarah began to rediscover herself. She found joy in discussing novels over tea, laughter while baking cookies with strangers, turned friends, and purpose in mentoring others who felt lost like she once did. By the time she fully recovered, Sarah had become the heart and soul of the volunteer group. Inspired by Mary's strength training journey and John's nutritional overhaul, she took charge of organizing weekly gatherings. Each meeting buzzed with energy, lively debates about books, hands-on workshops teaching new skills, and heartfelt conversations about life's challenges and triumphs. Through these events, Sarah created a lifeline for dozens of seniors who might otherwise have slipped into isolation. Her efforts weren't just about filling calendars, they were about reigniting passions, fostering connections, and reminding everyone present that age is merely a number. Sarah's story became a beacon of hope for those around her. People marveled at how far she'd come, from a shadow of her former self to a vibrant leader inspiring others. Even Rick, now known for his piano performances, joined her group, bringing music to their meetings. Together, they proved that staying socially engaged isn't just about avoiding loneliness. It's about thriving despite the odds. Looking back, Sarah realized that her darkest hour had led her to her brightest chapter. By embracing human connection, she had transformed pain into purpose. And perhaps most importantly, she reminded everyone, including herself, that none of us are truly alone unless we choose to be. In the darkest moments of their lives, Anna, John, Rick, Mary, and Sarah stood on the precipice of despair, each facing trials that seemed insurmountable. For Anna, it was the suffocating grief after losing her ex-husband. For John, the looming threat of amputation due to unchecked diabetes. Rick grappled with the fear of fading into forgetfulness, while Mary faced the humiliation of physical weakness. And then there was Sarah, isolated in her silent apartment, teetering on the edge of hopelessness. Each story carried its own weight, a brush with death, a loss of independence, or the crushing weight of loneliness. But within those struggles lay seeds of transformation. What set them apart wasn't luck or genetics, but an unyielding determination to rise above their circumstances. With every step forward, whether it was Anna's first walk in the rain, John's reluctant bite of spinach, Rick's clumsy piano scales, Mary's shaky squats, or Sarah's hesitant smile at a neighbor, they defied the odds. Their journeys were not solitary. They leaned on friends, family, and communities who refused to let them give up. Together, they proved that resilience is not a solo act. It's a symphony of support and self-belief.